Food. It's a wonderful thing, yet an everyday thing. Who would have thought new discoveries about food would be getting scientists so excited?
I think this is one of the biggest developments in medical research.
I think there's a tremendous amount of potential there.
I really think we're encountering a revolution. Maybe we can prevent diseases by simply changing our diet.
The remarkable new discoveries are telling us that our current eating habits could be making us sick, very sick. Indeed, our food might be contributing to heart disease, cancer, asthma, allergies, arthritis, autism, depression, multiple sclerosis, diabetes, the list goes on. Now, we've been hearing for years how we should be eating healthy food, but this research is different. It's all about the bacteria that live in our intestines. Eat good food, you end up with good bacteria. Eat badly, and you get bad bacteria in your gut. Now, it turns out your gut bugs have an enormous influence on your health.
I think you can extend your lifespan by years, if not decades, with a healthy diet. And all the evidence is pointing to that.
In a two-part Catalyst special, we search out the experts in this emerging new field of medicine. Gut reaction. What you eat could be making you ill. The gut bacteria story starts at the beginning of life.
It should never give.
During the messy process of birth, a newborn gets covered in microbes.
If you were vaginally delivered, the microbes that you're coated in initially mostly come from your mother's vaginal community.
Baby also acquires some of mum's gut bacteria from traces of her faeces.
It always struck me that there was apparently poor piece of design, and that is that the vagina is terribly close to the anus, and usually there's some mixing of the two.
Oh, it's beautiful.
A bit like inheriting a gene, you can also inherit the bacteria from your mother.
And nature's even provided food for those fledgling gut bugs. Mum's milk has more than just nutrients for the baby.
Breast milk contains a lot of sugars that the baby can't metabolize, but they're important for promoting the growth of particular kinds of bacteria in the gut that are good. Also, there's increasing evidence that the milk itself is produced with bacteria in it.
To find out more, I went to the new Charles Perkins Centre at Sydney University, headed up by Professor Steve Simpson.
Steve. Graham, how are you?
Oh, very well.
Welcome to our cathedral.
Yeah, what a cathedral. What a lovely building. It's amazing.
The association between gut bacteria and health has only been discovered in the last few years.
There were a few key researchers, particularly in North America, who started to demonstrate the association.
The surprise is we're home to many trillions of bugs. Living on us and inside of us are an enormous number of bacteria. In fact, the bacterial cells outnumber ours by 10 to 1. And if you're talking genes, the bacteria contribute 100 times as many genes as our genomes do. So when you think about it, they're not really our bacteria, we're their human. Some scientists now say we're a supraorganism, like a termite colony or a beehive, where individuals are just part of a whole.
Oh, absolutely. An organism that's consistent of both human cells as well as microbial cells, all working together for perhaps a common good.
Together, the bacteria weigh about 1.5 kilograms, as much as our brains. And most live in the gut. Here's a quick biology lesson for you, in case you've forgotten since your school days. You eat your food, it goes down the esophagus into the stomach, where it's pre-digested. From there, it's into the small intestine. Now, that runs for about 7 metres. Any food that's left over then gets into the large intestine, the bowel, this grey region. And that's where most of the gut bacteria are. Most of us think of bacteria as generally nasty bugs, rather than friendly organisms. Even science held this view until recently.
But people viewed microbes as these insidious little creatures, and so when people came along and wanted to study the health benefits of microbes, it was really very much on the fringes of science. And I think it's fair to say that there are many, many fascinating stories about how microbes can be beneficial that are just waiting to be discovered.
Most of the bacteria in our guts require an anaerobic, an oxygen-free environment. So, as soon as they're exposed to air, they die, which means they can't be cultured in a lab. The discoveries we're beginning to make about this inner microscopic world are the result of a revolution in technology.
About 10 years ago, there was an explosion in technology that enabled us to sequence the DNA that's inside the bacteria. So for the first time ever, we could start to understand the thousands of different types of bacteria inside us without having to culture them.
To sequence someone's gut bacteria, DNA is extracted from a biopsy or a fecal sample.
We break that now into 100 million pieces and put it on this chip. We know the human genome now, so everything else in there must be non-human. Yeah. Most of it's bacteria. So with computing, we then assemble all those sequences and we can actually figure out each individual bacterial DNA in the sample.
So it's like assembling some giant jigsaw, basically.
It is. It's a 100 million jigsaw piece.
It's some tough puzzle.
It would be, and again, without the power of the computing technology we have now, we wouldn't be able to do it.
Because of this technology, we're learning why these bacteria are critical to our health. And one of the main reasons is they help educate the body's defences.
We now know that the bacteria inside us control a lot of our immune system. They produce molecules, small molecules, that regulate our immune response.
But why would gut bacteria educate the body's defences? Because the education process must involve the immune system coming into contact with bugs from the outside world. Here's a quiz question for you. What part of the body has the greatest exposure to the outside world? Now, you might think it's the skin, but actually, that only has about 2 square metres of exposure. The correct answer is the human digestive system. It's 200 times larger, almost the size of a couple of tennis courts. It's mainly in the gut that the immune system learns what to and what not to attack. And our bacteria don't just affect physical health, they also have pathways to our brains.
There are probably many different types of connections between gut bacteria and the brain.
So your bacteria may influence how you think.
If you said to somebody, maybe 10 years ago, the community of things that live in your gut are affecting your mental health, you would have been laughed at. In fact, I think I probably laughed at people who suggested that in those early days. It's an extraordinary revolution, I think.
If our health is tied up with our bacteria, what bad effects could the modern world be having? Caesareans, for example, now account for up to 1 in 3 births.
Every mammal that survived until very recently has come out via the birth canal. C-section is a very new thing in evolutionary terms.
C-section babies are not readily inoculated with natural bacteria.
And in fact, people have looked at this process and sampled microbes from babies that were born through natural childbirth and cesarean section, and shown that children born through cesarean section have gut microbes that look more like the microbes that live in our skin than children who are born in natural birth that have gut microbes that look more like microbes that live in the intestine.
It's still early days yet, but already there are clues caesareans may affect health.
The literature in allergy and asthma indicates that children born to cesarean section are more likely to develop these types of disorders than children born to natural birth.
But of course, caesareans save lives, So if you've got to have one, you've got to have one. Bottle feeding is also likely to result in different gut bacteria.
Children that were breastfed are likely more protected against allergy and asthma than children who were fed formula. And I think that these principles, though there isn't direct evidence, I think these principles can extend beyond just allergies to autoimmunity, to neurological disorders, and perhaps several other indications that we don't yet understand.
While these possible health problems from entering the world unnaturally are disturbing enough, what about the unnatural diets we eat these days? Our gut bacteria change depending on what we eat.
Diet changes what you're feeding to your bacteria, and because your bacterial species all have a slightly different requirement for nutrients, then you're going to support different communities.
Eat bad food and you support bad communities of bacteria. And there seems to be one main bad food culprit. We're eating too many low-fibre meals these days. Indeed, a lot of research is now pointing to low fibre being largely responsible for that long list of diseases.
It's been a real explosion. It's very exciting times now, and we're starting to understand for the first time how what we eat defines a lot of disease and how we can actually avoid that disease by looking at diet.
The people who take the highest levels of fibre are the ones that are living the longest.
How much fibre should we naturally eat? Oh, to time travel, back to the Stone Age, and actually see what our ancestors ate. Well, Africa's Hadza people kind of provide a glimpse of that.
Every astrophysicist dreams of watching a star being born or a galaxy being born. And for us, we can watch how the Hadza interact with their environment.
Jeff Leach lives with and studies the Stone Age Hadza people. They're some of the last people in the world still getting 95% of their food from hunting and gathering.
They literally still hunt the same animals that our ancestors have hunted and scavenged for millions of years. They drink literally the same water. They gather the same plants. They're covered in the same soil.
If there's a natural human diet, it's something like this.
The men get up every morning, they go hunting and gathering. They collect honey, they hunt animals with poison arrows. The women dig tubers, collect berries.
The Hadza eat a remarkable variety of food.
But the one thing that is striking about the diet is the extraordinary quantity of dietary fiber that the Hadza eat. We know that these Hadza kids and adults are eating literally 5-10 times more fiber than us in the West, which means they're feeding their bacteria on a regular basis.
And it's not just diet and the early years of life that are changing our gut bacteria. So are antibiotics.
We suspect that antibiotics are going to be very similar to diet.
They're a bit like dropping a nuclear bomb on your gut bacteria. Particularly vulnerable to antibiotics are young children.
The relationship between the microbial ecology of the gut and the priming and training of the immune system is such a critical thing in the development of a child that if you mess with that too badly, then that may be responsible for problems.
By late infancy, the bacteria in our guts begin to stabilise.
The best evidence that we have so far is that by the age of 3, the gut microbes of people look adult-like. And so I think that there is this critical window very early in life when gut microbes could affect the immune system or the metabolic and the nervous system.
Altogether, our low-fibre diets, antibiotics and Western ways have left us with very low diversity in our gut bacteria.
The most diversity we've ever seen is with the Hadza. So let's take a healthy adult in Australia. They might have 1,000 to 1,500 species of bacteria, depending on how you define species. A similar aged Hadza might have 2 or 3 times that much.
So, all the health problems on that long list may be connected to a lack of diversity and to the wrong type of bacteria, disturbing the immune system, leaving our bodies in a perpetual state of inflammation. Inflammation is one of the body's defence mechanisms and involves immune cells being released. But these defences can do harm if they're not properly controlled.
The cells which are built to kill bacteria are actually doing damage to our own tissue. And that's usually an inflammatory disease. And that's what happens in the islets in type 1 diabetes, or in the airways in asthma, or in the joints in rheumatoid arthritis.
And you can add obesity to that list. Here at the Charles Perkins Centre, Steve Simpson heads up a new state-of-the-art clinic to tackle our nation's weight problem.
We've got a population in Australia, something like 62% of us are overweight or obese. So
62%?
It's the majority condition now.
Yeah, isn't it? Just a quick tour gives you a feel for the crisis.
So in the clinic, we bring in our experimental subjects and we can manipulate their diet, keep them overnight so that they have a chance to acclimatise to conditions. But of course...
That is a big chair.
That's a very big chair. All of the chairs, in fact, all of the furniture in the place has to be rated to 380 kilograms or above.
Right, okay.
That's just a measure of the mass of the problem, if you like. And if we come through here, let me show you where the gut bacteria enter another environment.
A giant toilet.
You need a giant toilet.
Also, strong enough to withstand more than 380 kilograms. Now, the common view is just too many calories are the cause of obesity. But could it be more complex than that? Here's something to think about. Maybe there's more to losing weight than just exercise and eating less. Maybe you also have to change your gut bacteria.
There's a famous experiment. They took what's called an OB mouse strain, which is a strain of mouse that's genetically predisposed to obesity, rendered it free of bacteria.
Then they gave these mice new gut bacteria from thin mice. Incredibly, they now tended to stay thin. Gut bacteria could be helping make the modern world fat. Back in the day, obesity was a rarer thing. There could have been better gut bugs then, as a result of eating less processed food. In other words, less sugar, fat and more fibre. That's a stark contrast to the modern world. But there's good news if you're overweight. Your gut bacteria community can be altered.
You can change it by changing your diet. And so if you manipulate the combination of protein, fat and carbohydrate in the diet, you can shift the composition, the community ecology, if you like, of the gut really quite profoundly.
In short, to do this, you have to eat a lot more fruit and vegetables. And another disease that was rarer in old times, but growing at a frightening pace today, is type 2 diabetes. And again, bad bacteria from eating too much processed food could play a key role. If you want a good reason to start eating healthier food, consider this. Just one meal of junk food could be enough for your body to have a bad reaction. To demonstrate, Gideon Cordova has volunteered to be our catalyst guinea pig. He's 24 years old, a gymnast, and pretty fit and healthy.
Well, I train doing gymnastics a couple of times a week. I try and go as often as I can.
The two of us are going to take a junk food challenge. It's been a while since I've had a breakfast like this, I can tell you. The things I do for science. Okay, let's go.
Dig in.
The idea is we eat a typical fast food meal and so load our bodies with sugar and fat.
You're allowed to eat burgers with nice and balls.
That's not the official way of doing it.
Well, maybe I'll start a new fashion here.
Hopefully it might take off.
Cheers.
Cheers to you.
Syringes of our blood are then taken to see what this food is doing to us.
All right, so I'm just going to get you to roll up your sleeve. Thanks.
Yeah, you're nice and gentle, right?
I'll be very gentle.
Yeah, I don't like that green there.
Samples are collected regularly over the next several hours. They're measuring a whole lot of things, including the amount of sugar that's currently in our blood and the triglyceride levels, the fats. It's a long and boring day with a lot of waiting around. And this young guy's a bad influence.
They shouldn't leave us alone in here.
Oh, there we are. Speak to the devil. Quick, hide the evidence.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. You're just in time.
At last, the final test.
Okay.
5 hours later.
I think I'm running out of blood.
Next, the samples will be sent off for analysis.
The results.
And you'll be surprised what they reveal about diabetes. It'll take a few days to get the results, so in the meantime, let's head off to Melbourne. Maybe it's not surprising that obesity and diabetes are related to bad gut bugs. But what about asthma? It must be a real buzz to have some disease as a kid and then grow up to be a scientist who finds a cause for that disease that could lead to new treatments. Well, we're about to meet a girl who's done just that.
Hello.
Alison Thorburn and her sister had bad childhood asthma.
My sister was just
Oh, yeah, right.
she had
She won't like you showing that photo.
No, she won't. Sorry, Beck. And yeah, it was pretty tough and annoying. More so annoying because you're always that kid in the playground with the Ventolin in your pocket. I remember my mum limiting what we could eat, which was really strange. I remember one day she said, we're not allowed to have oranges anymore because your sister's allergic to oranges. It makes her asthma worse. Yeah. So I was really annoyed at my sister that I wasn't allowed to have oranges. No orange juice. Also wheat and yeast and Vegemite at some stage. So I used to always say to my mum, why? Why can't I eat this?
Yeah.
And she couldn't give me an answer.
Alison's scientific curiosity in asthma had been sparked. Now, Alison is a postdoctoral researcher at Monash University. And she's found a new treatment for asthma, well in mice at least, which is incredibly simple. She just puts them on a high-fibre diet.
This machine allows us to measure the lung function of the mouse. So it measures the resistance in the airways, the bronchoconstriction of the airways.
So that's like a measure of asthma, basically, how restricted
That's
the airways are.
That's right. So it's measuring the ability for the mouse to be able to breathe.
An allergen is pumped into the chamber and the resistance in breathing measured.
Then when we give the mice a high-fibre diet, they have much lower resistance. They still get an increase in their resistance, but it's much less constricting. And this indicates to us less bronchoconstriction and an easier capacity to breathe.
So this mouse here, the blue,
Yep.
is on a high-fibre diet.
That's right.
There's less resistance in the breathing.
That's right,
It's pretty clear result.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was very impressive when we saw this.
We see these dramatic differences between these, identical mice but on different diets. And it's really speaking to just how important diet is to health.
But how does fibre fix up asthma?
So we know that when we give the mice a high-fibre diet compared to their normal diet, their gut bugs, their bacteria, change dramatically.
The mice end up with more good bacteria.
There's the recognition now that there are really good bacteria that produce great things for our health. In particular, short-chain fatty acids, which is the molecules we work on. Dietary fibre gets broken down to produce these short-chain fatty acids, and then they do amazingly good things in the gut and also throughout the body.
Short-chain fatty acids are particular kinds of acids. A familiar one is acetate, the basic component of vinegar. Now, it's important to have acetate in your body, particularly in the digestive tract, because it helps dampen the immune system. It's a natural anti-inflammatory. Indeed, some immune cells carry receptors, that bind to any acetate molecules they encounter. The binding sends messages to the immune system. Charles Mackay's team discovered the role of one such receptor, which they called GPR43.
And we found it to be highly expressed on the gut epithelium, on immune cells, these inflammatory cells that cause all this damage. And so we thought, well, this receptor must be doing something important and must be connecting the immune system with the gut bacteria and with diet.
Because they're anti-inflammatory chemicals, they help prevent inflammatory diseases like asthma. Hi.
Hi, ma'am.
I'm Graham.
Graham, pleased to meet you.
Gideon.
Gideon, pleased to meet you.
Those test results from the junk food challenge are now in.
You've got good news for us, I'm hoping.
I do. And I think what's really interesting is that we really tested out how your body copes with the stress of having some junk food. You had a perfectly appropriate glucose response, and the triglycerides rose as we would expect, but didn't rise too much, as can happen. Now, I would expect with both of you being fit, young, healthy weight people.
Young, I'm young too, thanks.
Yeah, we're all young. We're all young. But where things differed is the amount of insulin that was required to give you that normal metabolic response. And Gideon, essentially you needed 2 to 3 times as much insulin to keep the glucose and triglyceride levels as normal as they were compared to Graham's.
The news was a big surprise for Gideon.
I actually, I came in here with some confidence thinking I'll be fine. I'm half of Graham's age, or maybe a third, I don't know. But I'm much younger. But this is a huge shock to me and quite nerve-wracking.
Insulin is a hormone that is responsible for getting the major fuel for our body, glucose, into the cells and allowing our body to process that fuel for all of its energy requirements.
The problem is, too much insulin is unhealthy for the body in many ways. Gideon's high demand for this hormone could eventually lead him to diabetes. But why would a fit young man have this pre-diabetic condition? Well, it all comes down to gut bacteria. We'll find out more next time, and we'll try to fix Gideon's problems. Indeed, we'll discover ways we can all have better gut bacteria and so live healthier lives. Connect with Catalyst on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube and our website.